Welcome to Ignite 2020, a career exploration series. This session is specifically focused on management and operations. And my name is Katie Martucci. I work in career services as our employee relations advisor. And I want to start off by sincerely thanking our event sponsors for this Ignite. So that includes H.U.N.K.S, Hauling Junk and Moving. And we have representatives from that company today here on our panel, which I'm excited about, as well as the Delaware Valley University Alumni Council. So thank you both. And all of our panelists have agreed to get in touch with you after the event today. So if you would like to reach out, you can contact CSPD at delval.edu, or like I said, you can join our professionals at the roundtable. If you run into any technical difficulties, just go ahead and use the chat feature to the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll be able to help you out. So we will now get started. All right, so welcome panelists.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And I would love if you could introduce yourselves, tell us your name, your title, where you work, and then we'll dive into questions. So Cosmo, Marianne, you're first on my screen if you want to go ahead.
Sure. I'm Marianne Losco. Cos and I are the owners of the what we call the Bucksmont franchise of H.U.N.K.S, Hauling Junk and Moving. So we service all of Bucks County, parts of Montgomery County, and we go up to Lehigh County also. We have both, I have a pretty strong human resources background. Cos will introduce himself, but he has an operations background. And we have owned this business since April of 2015 and previously worked in the corporate world.
I'm Cos Losco. Like Mary said, we've owned this business for 6 years. It's operations professional. Once I graduated Del Val in '84, worked with 3 different companies during that tenure. Got too old and too expensive back in 2015. Got asked to leave, and we were looking for something to do. Just the core values of the franchise we loved, so we took a shot on ourselves, and it's worked out.
Thank you, guys. And Jamie, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jamie Gunderman. I most recently was a recruiting relationship manager at Mondelēz International. If you don't recognize the name, you probably know the products that they make: Nabisco Oreo cookie, Sour Patch Kids, Swedish Fish, Ritz crackers, many, many delicious things, just to name a few. And before that, I was working for Anheuser-Busch. I started my career in engineering and operations, but then moved over to human resources and had been there ever since. But I currently am taking a little bit of a break from work to spend some time at home with my family. I have 3 kids at home, one who is a 1-year-old running around like crazy. So hopefully we pray that she stays napping and quiet for this call. But that's a little bit about today. Working from home with family is a unique challenge.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it. All right, so panelists, our first question here. So think back to your first job and how that impacted your career and where you are today. And go ahead, Cosmo, Marianne.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I went to Penn State University. I graduated with a degree, a BS degree in accounting. And I interviewed in spring of my senior year with quite a few different companies. And I went to work for Mobil Oil when I graduated. So I think what happened with me was I was an accounting major, but I knew I didn't really want to be an accountant. I didn't want to work for, back then, what were considered the big 8 accounting firms. So I didn't interview with public accounting, but I really had a strong interest in going the corporate route. So I was hired by Mobil Oil, and I started in an accounting type role, and eventually I migrated into management. I was a customer service manager. And then eventually from that, I kind of naturally progressed into human resources. At the same time, when I first started working, I went back to school and got my MBA from Temple with an emphasis in human resource management. knowing that I really enjoyed working with people. I really like that one-on-one interaction with people. So I think, my first job allowed me to go back to school and get my graduate degree and kind of feel some different things out and lead me into the direction that was kind of the best fit for me.
When I graduated in '84, I graduated a business degree. Manufacturing was really booming around this area. I really liked numbers and planning. I landed my first job as a material expediter for a company called H.U.N.K.S, which was a world leader in semiconductors. We were a capital equipment manufacturer. Got a chance to go in there. Actually, it was kind of cool because there was 3 or 4 other Del Val grads that I knew. We all worked together in the same department. It was a lot of fun. We worked really hard. We learned a lot. Getting groundwork on your career and foundation is so important. And I'm very lucky to work in a growing company like that and get the experience that I received, along with having fun and enjoying it. You got to enjoy what you're doing, and it just validated that was something I wanted to do the rest of my life, and it springboarded it.
Go ahead, Jamie. Thanks.
I too, fellow Penn State grad, not Del Val, but something we have in common there. I graduated from Penn State with my degree actually in chemical engineering. Although I followed a slightly different path. I am an engineer who absolutely loves people. I really wasn't even aware that a career in operations was a possible thing. But that's why I think events like this are so important. Honestly, where I learned about my first job was at a career fair on campus. Anheuser-Busch came to talk to the students, and I knew that I had done some internships and co-ops. I loved manufacturing. I loved being out there on the manufacturing floor. So I went to work for their brewery in Newark, New Jersey. And that's where I started my career. I started out as a production supervisor and actually got a chance to manage a team, which was pretty unique, as a young, especially female graduate coming out of school and working in a very male-dominated field of manufacturing. But I loved it. I loved the challenges that it brought me every day. I loved the people, and it brought me to where I am today, still working, not currently taking a little break, but still working with a food manufacturing company, and then actually moving to human resources. I had always done the college recruiting events and a lot of the college hiring, and my team saw that I had a talent to, find individuals that were a great fit for our company. So that's how I ended up in human resources and recruiting. And I love that just as much. I get the best of both worlds. I get to recruit the folks who want to go work in manufacturing. So it's pretty cool.
Thank you. Okay, so I think, Jamie, you might have touched on this a little bit already, but put this question out to everybody. So how has your career differed or stayed the same from what you imagined it would be when you first started out?
Good question. I really didn't have, I knew I wanted to do something that I enjoyed. I wasn't sure that manufacturing was going to be it or sales was going to be it. So, was able to explore it. Like I said, the first job was really great, but the second job was even greater. Was able to get lucky with a startup company. We were a $200,000 company when I started. We were 120 million when we finished. And that just gave me just experience in things that I didn't even think I could do. Material planning, expediting, operational from the material side, that was good. But somewhere along the line, I got in charge of the manufacturing area. And that was probably the biggest switch I've ever made. I learned how to be a manager at that point because I started to trust my people and delegate, and that was the biggest transition I went through in my career. And they just threw me into a pool, and they knew I couldn't help myself because I wasn't technical, I wasn't an engineer, and it was a very strong engineering-driven product. So I learned to trust people.
Okay. And the question again was what? Can you repeat it again?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Before I answer it.
Yeah. How has your career differed or stayed the same from what you imagined it would be when you began?
When I began, I think I did mention that, I pursued that degree in accounting, but I really struggled my senior year. I remember thinking, I don't think I want to sit behind a desk. I don't want to crunch numbers all the time, but I was good at math. So in the fall of that year is when most people were interviewing with the big public accounting firms, and I just couldn't get myself to do it. And I was fortunate enough, like I said, in the spring to interview with some really good companies, took a job in what was more of a number crunching type thing, but really learning how to draw on my strengths. And like I said, immediately went back to school, started working towards my master's, knowing that I wanted to be more face-to-face with people, or in a role where I was, helping people. So I guess where I started and where I ended up, I kind of knew where I wanted to end up, but just that process to kind of get you there. And then to add to that, I joke around with Kaz and we say, 7 years ago, if you would have asked us if we'd ever own a business, we would have said absolutely not. Entrepreneurship was not something that we both strived for. I would have never imagined us working together. I would have never imagined us owning a business. So, life leads you at times in certain directions too. And, we're thrilled that this is where we're at, but it's certainly not where we pictured we would be.
No.
No.
I thought I'd be a junk hauler.
Right.
No, I think that's wonderful and so powerful for students to hear that, it's good to be open to the opportunities as they present themselves, and that flexibility can lead to really great things. But Jamie, go ahead.
Like you said, I think I touched on it a little bit before, but I don't think I ever expected to find myself in a steady human resources role. I get the comment all the time, what the heck is an engineer hanging out in HR? Because typically I know, at least when I was hiring, like he kind of talked about manufacturing, it takes a different personality. It takes somebody, who wants to work with people. And, you should not stereotype, but some do. And they say, oh, engineers, they like to look at their pencils and their paper, and work on projects and don't deal with people. So it's really unique to be able to find myself in a recruiting role where I can go out and look for, the attributes that we're looking for, and realize that there is not one stereotype. An engineer is in a certain way, a human resources personnel is in a certain way. I've supported, supply chain functions when he's talking about materials, hiring those type of folks. And the most unique thing that I didn't really expect is I found myself in a role that, although I loved manufacturing, it was probably one of my favorite places to work, and I do honestly miss it every day. But we were in a 24/7 facility. We worked 365 days a year. Brewing is a biological process, so someone was there on Christmas, someone was there on Thanksgiving, someone was there on New Year's Eve. I signed up to work New Year's Eve every year because I didn't want to work Christmas and Thanksgiving, because those were important family holidays to me. But that was a sacrifice that I was willing to make, and I was happy to make. The overtime pay was excellent. I will throw that out there to anybody who's considering that type of career. But it isn't as family friendly. So I really enjoy the fact now that the role that I'm in, that I am able to work from home, and it still allows me to touch those attributes of a company and roles that I really love, but I can be at home, not when I'm phone interviewing somebody with a baby pulling on my leg, but it's definitely a little bit more family friendly. So I'm surprised to find out that I can still do something that I love that fits with my family's needs. I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and that's powerful messaging, I think, for students to hear too. So not only does your career have the potential to change and shift over your lifetime, but your career values have the potential to change and shift along the way too. And what's important to you when you first graduate may change as you grow and evolve into your career. So thanks. Let's see, I'm going to ask this question here. So can you share an example of an obstacle, a professional obstacle that you faced, and how you overcame it? So that could be something long ago, maybe when you were even a student. It could be something that just happened yesterday.
Professional obstacle. All right, okay, I'll go. Actually, when I worked for Mobil Oil, I transferred and I moved to Kansas. So, I'm an East Coast girl, Philadelphia area, in my mid-20s, all by myself, interviewed for a particular position with them, and moved out there alone. After about 6 months, I realized it was probably a mistake. And that's, a really hard decision to make, was to kind of evaluate. I missed home. I missed the East Coast. I missed my family. And I had a lot of friends that were living in different areas of the country after college, but I had to make a really hard personal decision that I had to leave the company to return home. I didn't have the opportunity to work for them to come back to this area. So I made a personal decision to make a move to come back to this area. And at the time, I didn't have another full-time opportunity. So I worked a part-time job while I did some additional recruiting, or interviewing and recruiting, and was very fortunate to land a job that I really loved. So sometimes you have to look at your, personal circumstances, that might be difficult, and make some hard decisions.
I think the biggest obstacle was 2014 into 15. Once, we got let go by corporate America, like Mary said, never wanted to be an entrepreneur, never thought about being an entrepreneur. Just thought I'd get another job in corporate America and just finish it out. It didn't happen that way. For a few reasons. One, interview process wasn't going very well. This thing kind of fell on our lap, kind of a weird way of getting into it, actually. And we'll tell a story real quick. My aunt's husband passed away. I was her sole surviving relative. And she had this house in Langhorne, Pennsylvania that needed to be cleaned out. And I said to Mary Ann, I said, there's no way I'm cleaning that house out. Somebody does that stuff for a living. And I Googled house clean out, and up came college hunks hauling junk. And it was weird from the minute we saw it. It just attracted us. We got to meet the founders. They were actually on the first episode of Shark Tank. Just loved them, loved the model, loved the values. And it all worked out, but the transition from corporate America to here was very stressful,
to say the least. Yes.
Thank you for sharing that story.
There's been many professional obstacles. I would love to say there have been none, but that would give you kind of a false sense of security about the work world. But I think I'll talk about when I first started my career. Like I had mentioned, I was a young female engineer straight out of college, going into a manufacturing role. I was supervising individuals who were maybe 2-3 times my age. We were a unionized facility, so that brings forward its own unique challenges, but I was really willing to take it on. And one of the things, I think Cos may have even mentioned it earlier in a different answer, but what I learned was, I think he said trusting his people, and I was sitting here shaking my head, because although I did have my technical degree, and although I had done well in all of my classes, and I had excelled in certain engineering courses, learning things in a book and on paper is very different than learning them in the real world. So what I had to learn was that I had to trust my people, and I had to sit with them and learn with them. We actually had an excellent training program where we can sit and spend a day, almost like a day in the life with each of the different operators, learning about the folks who weighed hops for brewing, and, the people who filtered out the beer before we sent it to packaging, getting to spend some time with bottling and operations, and just getting to see the whole facility and really taking the time to listen, and letting my people know that I did care about them, And although I was there to make sure that they did their job for the day, because there was a fine line, I didn't want them to walk all over me and not do what they were supposed to get done for the shift, but to let them know that we're all here for a common goal. We're all here to get that delicious Budweiser beer into the bottle. Although I don't know that students are drinking Budweiser, probably not. Maybe Bud Light, maybe Busch Light. I don't know. Not that I should be promoting that. I am not. Eat Oreos instead. Everybody should eat your Oreos. But anyways, essentially the gist that I was getting at was learning to really trust them and letting them know that I was open to learn. I had electricians, pipe fitters, those type of crafts working for me as well. And, although I had taken some basic physics class, I know very, very little about electricity. So I would say to them, take me out to your problem, show me, explain to me. And I think what worked really, really well for me was letting them know that I was willing to listen and that I wanted to learn too, and that I understood even though I was maybe the supervisor or the manager, that I had a lot to learn from them. And they are still individuals that are good friends of mine and that I keep in close contact with today, even though we're not working together.
Thank you. This may be our last question for the panel, we'll see, but go out with a bang here. So kind of along the lines of the last question, but can you think about a professional mistake or failure and what you learned from it? So something where you're like, yeah, I really missed the mark on that, but then how you grew, how you learned from it.
I'll go. I can think of one, and only because something that Anne said earlier triggered this thought in my mind, and I thought, oh, I've done that too. So I won't mention company names, but there was a time, like I said, I loved being at Anheuser. I was happy there, but I was getting burnt out, just from the amount of overtime. Now, I was taking a lot of the overtime on myself because I had college loans to pay off, and I had a goal. Like, as you said so clearly, goals and values can change throughout your career, and I think that's important for the students to understand. But I had a boss that I didn't really love at the time. Most of my managers there were amazing, but I had just moved under a new individual and we weren't really clicking. I felt like maybe she wasn't valuing what I had to bring to the table. She was putting a lot of extra work on me because I was one of her strongest players. And I had a recruiting company call me and they dangled a very, very large carrot in front of me. And they offered me a job that sounded too good to be true. They were significantly increasing my salary to the point that it was extremely difficult to say no. There were some red flags that I was like, I don't think this is what I was really looking for. I told them they wanted me to interview for a second shift job, which would be like 3 to 11. And I said, listen, I was currently on a rotating shift job. I'm not willing to move shifts. So to make, a very long story short, they said, oh, we're going to create a first shift job for you, a day shift job. So I jumped, took the move, went to the new role. It was not at all what I expected. It was a great company, but, they were trying to get me to do things that, it really the work-life balance that I was looking for and that they had promised. So thank goodness I had not burned a bridge when I left Anheuser. My brewmaster actually called me several months out, and I was very blessed to have this opportunity and just check on me. And he said, I want to tell you something from earlier in my career. And he told me, this is our brewmaster who had shared a story that he had left Anheuser thinking that the grass was greener on the other side. And he ran into his old boss in the Atlanta airport years ago. And he said to him, when you're ready, you call me back. So he called me, he told me this story, which I never knew. And he said, when you're ready to come back, you call me. And I'm so happy he gave me that opportunity, because 2 months later, I was like, you know what, I should have never left. I would have never, had the courage to call and check on my own, but I called him back, and 2 months later, I was back working for Anheuser-Busch. So I only stayed with that other company for about 9 months total. But I realized very early on that I left something that I loved. And honestly, the only reason that I left Anheuser and moved to Mondelēz was that I had twin boys who had some special needs. And the current job with Mondelēz was a little bit more flexible to being able to stay at home with them.
Okay.
So you got good thing?
No, you go ahead. I'm just having
I guess biggest failure, very similar to what Jamie was talking about. Working for a division of Tyco back in the early 2000s. Great job. Took care of me. The only problem is I had to go back and forth from where I live now to Harrisburg, which is about an hour and a half. But they were awesome. I mean, I only had to be there twice a week. I drive down. They put me in a hotel. Got to travel a lot. Really good. And my friend calls me and says, "Hey, known this guy since he was 16. He was president of the company. Hey, we need an operations guy. Would you be willing to work with us?" And I jumped on it because I didn't want to go back and forth to Harrisburg anymore. I didn't really think it out very well. I jumped right in on it. I didn't do any homework to understand the culture that I was getting into. The relationship that I had with him was going to change. I didn't think it through. And I guess, if I would have sat down and did something, plus minuses on paper, I probably would have stayed with Tyco. But, I jumped into it because it was close for home. I figured, this guy, we've been friends since we were 16. It's going to be great, nice and easy. But, from day one, I didn't really like what I was doing. Very similar to Jamie. I hated it. I stayed there for 7 years until they let me go. But it was an absolute mistake.
And I think the fact that you stuck it out for 7 years, it was hard. It was very, very, it was difficult. Thankfully, it's kind of what led us to where we are now, because he was kind of let go out of the blue, and then, looking for a job, and I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. So here we are. I think overcoming a challenge, I think I'm going to talk a little bit more current, because I think it kind of plays into today's work environment. I'm in charge of all the recruiting for our company and human resources stuff, and it's a constant challenge to hire people these days. And I think when faced with a challenge like that you just have to be creative. So I think that, one word of advice is to just kind of think outside the box sometimes when you're faced with particular challenges, different ways to recruit, different, just different methods from the normal stuff. So I know that's just, one small piece, doesn't really talk about my overall career, but I think it's just, just looking at what those different ideas and opportunities are that you can, tackle problems that way.